In the year 1483, on the coast of Central Africa, people looked out at the ocean and saw something impossible: giant boats with white wings gliding toward the shore. And when the strangers stepped onto the beach, the people of the Congo Kingdom reached a perfectly logical conclusion. These weren't men, their skin was pale as chalk, and everyone knew that when a person dies and crosses into the land of the dead, their skin turns white. The visitors weren't explorers, they were ghosts. The dead had come back, which raises one of the most fascinating questions almost nobody asks. What actually happened when black people and white people saw each other for the very first time? What did they think? What did they feel? The real answer is stranger, funnier, and more hopeful than you'd expect, right up until the moment it isn't. And as for the question of when that very first meeting happened, the actual first time in human history, I'm saving that for the end of this video, because the answer breaks the entire question. Trust me, it's the twist this whole story turns on. First, let's meet the civilizations that wrote down what they saw. Start with the Egyptians because they left us pictures. Walk into an Egyptian tomb and you'll find wall paintings showing the peoples of the world side by side. Egyptians painted themselves reddish-brown, Nubians from the south a deep dark brown, Libyans from the west pale with light hair. Different colors, clearly drawn right next to each other. And here's what matters. They're presented like nationalities. Labels on a map, not a ranking, not a ladder. Just, this is what folks from over there look like. Then come the Greeks. Their word for the dark-skinned people south of Egypt was Ethiops, literally burnt face, because their best scientific theory was gloriously simple. People down south live closer to the sun, so they're toasted. People up north, less sun, less toast. That was the whole theory. Skin color wasn't destiny, it was weather. And the best part of the climate theory? Everyone used it, and everyone put themselves in the perfect spot. Greek thinkers argued that people in the hot south were clever but soft. People in the cold north were brave but wild. And the folks exactly in the middle, the Greeks, what a coincidence, had the perfect balance. Centuries later, Arab geographers ran the same logic and concluded the ideal middle zone was, naturally, theirs. Everybody's map of the world had the same legend. We live in the good part. Not hatred, just geography with a healthy dose of hometown pride. And how did the Greeks feel about these burnt faces? Herodotus, the father of history himself, described the Ethiopians as, quote, the tallest and most beautiful of all men. In Homer, the gods leave Olympus to go feast with the blameless Ethiopians. That's the actual reputation. Tall, beautiful, favored by the gods. In the Roman Empire, black Africans were soldiers, athletes, poets, and scholars. There were Africans serving along Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and one historian who spent his life studying this, Frank Snowden, put it bluntly. Nothing like modern color prejudice existed in the ancient world. Now, quick honesty stamp, because we always do this here. The ancients were absolutely capable of prejudice. They mocked foreigners, they enslaved everyone they conquered, but the dividing line was culture and conquest, not color. A Roman would look down on you for being Gaulish long before he'd care what shade you were. And if you want the ultimate proof, Rome was ruled, for 18 years, by an emperor born in Africa, Septimius Severus, from what is now Libya. An African-born man ran the most powerful empire on earth, and the Romans mostly commented on his accent. Okay, so that's one side of the story, written by Greeks and Romans. But what did the meeting look like from the other side? This is where it gets truly extraordinary. Back to that beach in 1483. To the people of Congo, those pale Portuguese sailors were Vumbi, ancestor spirits, visitors from the land of the dead. And think about how reasonable that was. These beings came from beyond the horizon, where the world ends. Their skin was the color of the dead. They had wealth nobody could explain. The theory fit perfectly. And then, horribly, the slave ships made the theory feel true. because the people who were taken aboard those ships never came back. Of course, that's the land of the dead. What else could it be? And here's a detail that will flip your perspective completely. You know how European explorers came home with wild stories about African cannibals? The fear went both ways. Many in Congo became convinced that the white ghosts were eating them. The story spread that Europeans turned their captives' flesh into the salted meat on their ships, their brains into that strange yellow stuff called cheese, and their blood into the red wine the pale men were always drinking. Two peoples staring across the same beach, each quietly convinced the other one was the monster. That's not a race story. That's a mirror. And for a brief, remarkable moment, it looked like the story might go another way. The king of Congo converted to Christianity, took the name Afonso, and wrote letters to the king of Portugal, addressing him as an equal. My brother, king to king. He sent his own son to study in Europe, and that son came back as a bishop. Two kingdoms, an ocean apart, corresponding like partners. That was on the table. And then the demand for enslaved people exploded. The ships kept coming, and Afonso spent his final years writing increasingly desperate letters to his royal brother, begging him to stop the slavers tearing his kingdom apart. The letters survive. The answers were never good enough. 300 years later, we get an even closer look. In 1796, a Scottish explorer named Mungo Park walked deep into West Africa, often the first white person anyone had ever seen. And the reactions he recorded are wonderful. Crowds gathered, not hostile, just burning with curiosity. Women examined his skin and tried to work out whether the white was painted on. People studied his strange thin nose. They counted his fingers and toes, checking, essentially, whether this pale creature was built like a normal person. And one night, when Park was at his lowest, soaked, starving, robbed of nearly everything, a woman found him under a tree, took the strange pale ghost into her hut, fed him fish, and as he fell asleep, the women of the house sang a song they made up on the spot about him. The poor white man, he has no mother to bring him milk, no wife to grind his corn. The first white man they'd ever seen, and their instinct was to feed him and feel sorry for him. Park's own conclusion, in the book he wrote afterwards, is the quiet headline of this whole video. Whatever the differences of skin and custom, as humans, we are essentially the same. So if ancient Egypt filed skin color under geography, if Greeks called it a suntan, if the Congo filed it under theology, and if first meetings ran on curiosity, where did the hatred come from? Here's the uncomfortable answer. It was invented, and we can roughly date the invention. In the 16 and 1700s, European colonies in the Americas were building an economy on enslaved African labor. And an economy like that has a problem. It needs a justification. You can't say, we do this because it's profitable. You need a theory that says, these people are naturally, permanently lesser. And so, piece by piece, the concept of race was assembled, a folk theory that hardened, in the 17th century, into an official worldview. Later, scientists drew up charts sorting humanity into color-coded categories, ranked like a pyramid. Skin color, which for thousands of years had been a footnote, a suntan, a costume detail on a tomb wall, was upgraded into a hierarchy, not because anyone discovered something new about human beings, but because a business model needed it to be true. Which brings us finally to the promise from the beginning. When was the actual first meeting? The first time in history a black person and a white person laid eyes on each other. Ready? It never happened. There was no first meeting, because every human on Earth descends from Africa, and as groups wandered out over thousands of generations, skin adapted to weaker sunlight slowly, shade by shade, like a gradient. Neighbors always looked like neighbors. There was never a day when two alien-looking peoples locked eyes across a field, because the change was too slow for any human to ever witness it. And if you want proof of how recent white even is, meet Cheddar Man. In a cave in southern England, scientists found the skeleton of a man who lived 10,000 years ago, one of the first Britons. And when they read his DNA, the reconstruction shocked everyone. Dark skin, blue eyes, dark curly hair. That was Britain. Light skin didn't become common in Europe until roughly 8,000 years ago, which means, and I love this fact, white people are younger than farming. Your bread is an older invention than your skin tone. So what happened when black and white people first saw each other? Mostly wonder, confusion, theories about weather and ghost, people checking each other's fingers and finding every time exactly 10. There was no first meeting, and the hate wasn't there at the beginning either. It was installed thousands of years into the story, on purpose, with a motive attached. Which is strangely hopeful if you think about it, because anything that was invented can be dismantled. If you enjoy digging up where our world actually comes from, the real stories under the stories, subscribe. There's a lot more history that isn't what you were told. I'll see you in the next one.